You're here. Welcome to the Masterminding Success podcast. They say if you want to be successful in business and in life, then surround yourself with successful people. So pull up a seat. The mastermind is about to begin.
Glad you could join us for another episode of the Masterminding Success podcast. We're your hosts, Keith Wheeler
and Nuria Corby.
And what are we talking about today, Nuria?
Today we're going to talk about what is a good BSR, and there's several angles we can really give this. So what do you think? What is a good BSR in your opinion?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. And there are certain BSR thresholds that I look at when I'm looking at a new niche. And when I'm talking about ebooks, I usually say 150,000. So when I'm doing niche research, I want at least 3 to 5 books on that first page to have a BSR at that range, or lower. But it's not, that's not all. It's not, that's just one thing to look at. You know what I mean? It's not the end all be all. But yeah, in general, 150,000, because that usually means that the book is selling, about one or two copies a month.
Yeah, and I think maybe we should mention that what we're talking about is when you do your research for a book, what is a good BSR to look out for while doing your research in your niche, and you come across different books. So what would be a good BSR for them to show you that they're selling, that there's demand? So because there's different ways of looking at what is a good BSR. We could also talk about what is a good BSR in terms of what would we like as a BSR for our books.
Right. Well, and to kind of back it up just a little bit more, for those people who don't know, BSR is bestseller rank. And that's, that changes. The last time I checked, it was like every 90 minutes that it updates on Amazon, and it's based on sales. And if we're talking about ebooks, downloads as well. So, and so, like I said, that fluctuates, what's a 150,000 BSR today, could be, higher or lower than that come tomorrow.
And also, it doesn't necessarily have to be that book that sells. It could be other books in that category that are selling, and that will then, because I've had that quite a few times where my BSR has gone up or down, and I haven't had any sales. So why did that happen? And I imagine it's because other books in that category have been selling or not selling. So that obviously then creates my BSR to change.
Right. It'll fluctuate, like you said, based on your competition.
That's
you can, you could, and both positively and negatively, if the ones around you are selling more, then yours could drop because comparatively. Also, conversely, if yours is selling more and theirs, isn't selling as much, then yours may go higher than what it normally would have if they were selling at about the same rate. Yeah.
So it's quite I don't know, it's a tricky one to answer, because there's always, we can give guidelines, but there's always other things to consider as well. When we say, personally, what I do is when I do my research for books, I have a look and see how many results come up, first of all.
Right.
And if it's over 1,000 results, then I know there's a lot of competition. So I tend to find something that's maybe better. And it's when you get to like 400 results where it really gets. So anything under 1,000 results, I would say that's a good niche to look at. And if it's like around 500, 400 results, I would say that's a niche that we can explore because there's not a great amount of competition. And then I look at the BSRs and I look to see, how many books are there with low BSRs. And by low, I mean maybe I don't know, 120, 150,000. And obviously, the lower, the better.
Right.
But I think even a book with a BSR of 200,000 is still it's still a book that's
Right.
selling a certain amount of copies. So that's interesting to me. If I see lots of books that have very low BSRs, then I know there's a lot of demand. So the lower the BSRs and the more amount of books with low BSRs indicates, yes, there is demand. People are
Right.
buying these type of books. And if the search results are low, relatively low, then that means there's low competition as well. And those are the kind of niches that are more and more becoming unicorn niches
Right.
because there's not that many. But then also, um, I always say, don't be afraid of competition. You can always make your books stand out in some way. But that's more or less what we mean, what is a good BSR. So anything under 200,000, I would say, is still something I'd look at.
Yeah, and that's great examples because like I said, that's just part of the equation for
Mm,
me on whether I'm going to create a book in that niche. A great example you gave was if it's 200,000 or even you know higher than that, lower than that, depending on how you want to look at it. If
yeah.
it's like 250,000, 300,000, again, that's still showing that they sell.
Mm,
And if the question is if especially if there's low competition and they're selling, they may not be selling great, but then you look at the other aspects of it. You look at the covers, you look at the reviews, you know, you look at the page length. Are these things that you can compete with?
mm,
Because if there may be one that the best one is in the group is selling at, it may be 200,000 as a BSR. But if you can do a better cover and you're looking at the reviews and all the things that people are saying they don't like, you could with quality put into your book, well then you can easily, or not easily, but there's a viable chance that you can get even more sales than
mm,
the one that's doing 200,000 or 250,000 BSR. And so yeah, don't let a low BSR scare you.
mm,
Even if it's, especially if you're seeing multiple books in that niche, if all of them, you know, have a, something like 300,000 or higher BSR, so they're not selling as frequently, and none of them are, have really great, rankings like that, then that could tell you that the niche isn't as I don't want to say lucrative, but it's not as readily searched and purchased as, let's say romance.
yeah.
Romance, I mean, those readers are voracious readers. That's why if you look at those BSRs, many of them are, under 1,000.
Yeah.
It's super competitive but they're voracious. And so, it's, you have to take all of that into consideration. And especially if you want to make this into a business, typically you're not going to make enough money off one book that
Mm,
is going to replace your day job or is going to give you something that you can live off of. Can it happen? Absolutely. But like you were saying, that's more of a unicorn.
mm,
So, when you're thinking more of your business aspect, having a niche that you're in that you can dominate in, even if it's only, your average BSR is only going to be 200,000, whatever, that all adds up,
mm,
because again, one of the many things that I love about this, about self-publishing books is once you put it up there, it's up there forever.
mm,
So
yeah.
it's not like you have to, you know, keep recreating it, keep uploading it, or anything like that, or deal with customer service. That Amazon or whatever platform you're on, they do that all for you.
Yeah.
So, it's, creating a good quality book one time in that niche is, again, is going to take however long it takes you, but it's not like it's something that you have to keep going back to.
Mm,
So, yes, I think BSR is a good item to look at. Again, it's just part of the equation. It's
yeah.
not all of it, especially when you think you're looking at what the BSR is in a snapshot, like at that moment. Again, you can go back later on that day, you can go back, a day later, a week later, and it's going to be different.
Absolutely. I mean, and you said a few things there that are really true. And BSR, I mean, if it also depends so much on what niche you're in as well, because some
Right.
BSRs they suddenly shoot up if it's like, for example, it's Mother's Day coming up in the
Right.
US, I believe. We've already had ours in the UK in March, but so different countries have different holidays, and I've noticed that a lot of the books that are sort of good Mother's Day's gifts are, their BSRs have suddenly shot up or shot down, whichever way you want. So a low BSR of 2000 is really good, for example.
Right.
That would be
Right.
like amazing. And that's actually probably one of my books had that at one point, and that's the best BSR I've ever had. So so I've never had like anything under 2000. Or I can't remember now. Was it 200? I really have to look that up because I took a picture of it as well
Yeah.
because I thought that was a big achievement. But it depends on the niche as well, because if it's something like a seasonal book and that season is coming up, that holiday, yes, your books can suddenly shoot up, and the BSRs will in that niche will reflect that. So, and at other times it might not be so high. And the other thing you said as well that I really liked was about, you can have books that are 200,000, 250. They're still selling. And if you have a brand in those and you have several of them, that's your income right there.
Right.
You don't have to make your
Right.
income from one book, which is rare anyway. You can be a famous author and make your income with one book. But I think for us, it's much more realistic to have a variety of books and a catalogue of books. And some of them will sell. And if they sell regularly, then that's where we get our income. I was talking about that the other day, and I said, 80% of my books don't sell. It's actually 80, 70% sometimes.
Hmm.
And I said, everybody is like that. Would you say that's the same with you as well? Do your books have that sort of 80,
Yeah, that's
20?
yeah, the 80/20 rule is
Yeah,
pretty spot on when it comes to the niches and books that sell.
yeah.
Again, there's some niches, especially like you said, if you have a brand around it, that
Mm,
those are, if one of those picks up, you have a better chance that the rest will.
yeah,
But yeah, in general, it's 80/20. And as you do it more, and you're more experienced, then you can, you start double downing on things that work. You start being able to pick out, kind of even notice trends before they start,
mm,
things like that. Then you can do things, and you have a better chance of kind of bringing that 80/20, and kind of making it closer to, even more successful.
yeah,
But in general, I think 80/20 is very
yeah.
safe rule of thumb.
It was interesting because I think a lot of people didn't realize that that was
Hmm.
the case. A lot of people,
Yeah.
when they start publishing books on KDP, they think that they're going to publish a book and that book has to sell. If it doesn't sell, but not every book is going to sell. We're
Right.
going to create a lot of books that are never going to sell, and that's hard to kind of get your head around,
Right.
for some people, because they think, "What are you saying, that I'm working on a book and it might not sell?" Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
that's the case. So we do have to produce a few books to get going, and I always say it's about 20 books where things start to happen. So yeah, so obviously, what's a good BSR? It depends on so many things as well,
It
and on
does.
the niches and how you're going to, how you view it. For some people, a BSR of 250,000 is probably not very good. Oh, that's not
Right.
making a lot of money. But it does if you've got 10 books like that,
Right.
and they all
Yeah.
they all sell regularly. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of an abstract concept, really. What's a good BSR?
Yeah, and one of the things that I really want kind of drive home is because I see so many YouTubers and quote unquote gurus that spout about the BSR, and again they make it sound like it's the end all be all, and it's not.
Yeah.
Again, it's just a snapshot. It's just a number. I mean, it will give you an idea as to the popularity of, a niche. But again, it doesn't mean that you have to run ads to get a better BSR. I mean, that could work, but there's a lot of other things that go into it. But a great example that I talked about a little while ago was romance. The ones that are on page one are under 1,000, and they're under 1,000 consistently. But another thing about that niche is, again, they're voracious readers, which means it's not going to take long before reader A has already read all the books that they're interested on page one and page two and page three of the search. So you don't have to necessarily be on page one. So, and again, like we were saying, having a BSR of 200,000 or 250,000, while it might not sound great to many people, like you said, if it's your only book, it's not gonna be something that you're gonna write home about, but they're still selling,
Yeah.
and just like with any business, consistency is key. And so I would rather have 10, 20 books that are consistently around 200,000, 250,000, than have these ebb and flows and these spikes. And that's one reason why I personally don't do I don't create a lot of books around trends or around holidays. I'll have some,
Yeah.
but most of them are not seasonal, as we say.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. I know people that's their business model, and that's fine. If your business model is to only do seasonal stuff, well, then as long as you're doing, you're covering different seasons throughout the year, then you won't necessarily have all those ebb and flows for your business. You will for those particular books, but then ones that are, Mother's Day, for example, once the Mother's Day ones are done selling, Father's Day here in the US is right behind it. And so, things like that'll absolutely work. So, again, BSR, and especially with seasonal stuff, that's a great way to just prove that that the BSR is just a snapshot. Because if right now in early May, if you look up a Christmas book, it's not going to have a great BSR, but when you get to later, towards Q4, you're going to start seeing that BSR get better.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's absolutely true. And I agree with you when you said, you rather have a good amount of books that are selling, who have a fairly high BSR of 250 or 200, rather than one book that runs away with it, because you just don't know. It's a snapshot, and that book can suddenly drop as well. Whereas if you have several that are fairly stable, it's a lot better business-wise. If you look
Right.
at this as a book business, you really want to have those steady sellers, and they don't have to sell that much, but as long as they're steady and they keep churning over, that's really what you want. So yeah, I think it's a good question. What's a good BSR? But there's, like I said earlier, there's so many different levels to it and different things that you have to consider as well. And I agree with you about seasonal books. I do have more evergreen books than seasonal books for that reason, because again, I prefer to have that steady income rather than having a great big. Obviously, I wouldn't say no to having a more of a,
Right.
to a rush of Mother's Day's buyers or Christmas buyers. And
Right.
funny thing is, you should mention Christmas. I've got a book that sells when it's not Christmas, and it's a Christmas book. So it's really strange. I don't know who buys it. I really have no idea. Why do people buy Christmas books when it's not Christmas? It's a mystery.
I don't know.
Yeah,
And-
someone told me they had a planner that was like 3 years old and it's still selling.
yeah, I do. I have a
Do
planner
you?
that's 5 years old.
Wow.
I mean, I guess technically six because it was a 2020 planner,
Yeah.
and yeah, still sells. And I don't know if it's because it happened to be 2020, and we know how crazy 2020 was,
Yeah.
but yeah, it still sells, and it sells more than just one, one every once in a while. I mean, yeah, it surprises me every month when I see that
Amazing.
on my sales chart. But
I'm going
yeah,
to make a note of that. Create 2020 planner. Right.
yeah,
That's my next book.
yeah, yeah. That's your next book. Yeah. But
Yeah.
but no, I think it's a great question, and especially like I said, when you hear so many people talk about it, but again, it's it's a snapshot. It's not the end all be all. I absolutely have books that are in the millions,
Oh,
and and
yeah.
a few that have never even sold, and I do wish that that Amazon and KDP would do similar to what they do with merch, which is if a with merch, if a product doesn't sell even one in a
Mm.
year from when it was launched, then they take it, they delist it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I I I I don't think that would be a great way to take a lot of trash books up there
Mm.
that are on there. Now, once it sells one, it'll stay up there forever.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great way to kind of weed out the people that are doing this, just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, and
Yeah.
they're not putting quality into anything that they do. But we can what we wish we can do that in a whole nother episode.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder whether that's got something to do with the ISBNs, because an ISBN is quite an official document, really.
Hmm.
And if once a book has an ISBN, even if it is the free one from Amazon, it's kind of it's a book that's out there, and it might be why Amazon finds it hard to, maybe they can't I mean, you can unpublish, but it's still there. It's kind of, it never goes away, really. So I wonder whether that's why. And now that low content books don't need an ISBN, I wonder whether it's easier for maybe Amazon to do that eventually. I say eventually because
Yeah,
they take ages to to
yeah,
do things like
yeah.
that.
I know I've had books, this is a little bit off topic, but I've had books that are on that have been taken down off Amazon and are completely gone. Like you cannot find them on
Mm,
Amazon. They are completely gone. And then I've had ones that I've taken down that even though they've been delisted, unpublished, whatever you want to call it, and uh, and then they still show up on
mm.
Amazon. And the only thing I've seen that differentiates the two is the one that never gets taken down completely was in expanded distribution.
Ah,
Whereas
interesting.
the one that was not in expanded distribution, once I took it down, it was gone.
Wow.
So that might be the reason is so that way
Yeah.
they always keep it open for third parties. I don't know.
Mm.
But yeah, so that's just little side note that I've noticed.
Yeah, that's
But
interesting. I'm going to have a look at that.
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
But but yeah, but again, getting back to BSRs, like I said, I think it's a great question. I think if there's nothing else to take away from this, it's that if you have a quote unquote bad BSR, it's something that's in the millions, it's not the end of the world.
Mm.
It's very normal, especially if it's only your first book or your first few. You need to be honest and ask yourself why it's not selling.
Mm.
You know, is it the cover? Is it not really a great book? Is it not a niche that people are searching for?
Mm.
Are your keywords off? And again, being honest, or maybe it's a great book, but it's in a super competitive niche, and you're not running ads to, you're not promoting it anyway, and the unfortunately the days of publishing and praying are behind us.
Yeah.
You need to get some kind of momentum going. So,
Mm.
but either way, it's not the end of the world. Just know that it's normal, and don't let that one or two or 20 stop you from continuing. As long
Absolutely.
as you learn something from each book, then you're one step better than you were before you created it.
That is so important because I sometimes think about that, and I always say, nothing is ever wasted, nothing is a waste of time because you're learning so much through creating different books. And I don't want to give people false hope, but I've had a book that had a BSR in the millions. I even had one that never sold and it suddenly started selling. So you just never know what can happen as well, So when people say to me, shall I unpublish it? My BSR is really high. It's not going lower anytime soon. And I always say, no, wait, because you just don't know what's going to happen. I still don't know to this day what the reason was for that book to suddenly pick up selling. Since then, it stopped selling again. But I wouldn't have had that little bit of time where it did sell if I had unpublished it. So, and it also goes to show that you just never know what can suddenly take off and sell. So I would definitely, and it wasn't advertised, it wasn't anything I promoted, it was just suddenly started selling out of nowhere. So,
I mean, all it takes is one person finding it and sharing it with somebody else.
Yeah.
And, the only time I would say if someone were to ask me, it's got a bad BSR or hasn't sold at all, should I take it down? It would be if, does it go against Amazon or KDP's terms of service? If there's, if there's something that could jeopardize your account, absolutely delist it, take it down. But if other than that, even if it's not your greatest quality, I mean, we all get better. You always have to start somewhere. My very first journal that I ever published is what I actually went and created an updated one that had better content, more content, better formatting, and I did it like 5 years later, and my original one still outsells it.
Yeah.
And so it's we get better, but there are things that speak to different people.
Yeah.
And like I said, even if it's your BSR is in the millions, if it sells every once in a while, that's a start.
Yeah.
That's a start.
Absolutely. Yeah.
A $13 or $36, whatever my very first check was from KDP or CreateSpace back then. That's what started me in this journey. Was, hey, if I could do that with just one book, what could I do if I really take this serious?
Yeah, absolutely. And if one book sells, you can sell more books. When I've made my first £10, I thought if I can make £10, I can make 100. And if I can make 100, I can make 1,000. So, it's like that. We're not saying it's easy to do that, but it's also not that difficult. It is possible. So that's the main thing to take away from that. And there's so many ways of doing it. And the BSR is again, just something that is a snapshot. It's not forever.
Yep. It's just one metric to look at. And it's, again, I actually put less value, not value, but I worry less about the BSRs of books in a niche than I do about the competition. And again, I'm not afraid of competition, that means that's proof that books are, that people are interested in it.
Exactly. Yes.
But, I look at my competition's reviews. I look at not just how many stars they have, but I actually read them. I read the 4s and 5s. I read the 3s. The 3s are probably my favorite.
Yeah.
Because those are the ones that they'll still tell you the bad stuff, but they're not like just, they're actually useful content, I guess is the best way to put it. At least from my experience. And so I take all of that and that's what I use to, one, decide if I'm going to go into this niche, but also to help me decide what to include in my book if I go in that niche.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I do the same. 3 and 4-star reviews are the best.
Yes,
because 5-star reviews are just, I love this book, and you don't learn anything from that.
Right.
All you know is that they like the book and it must be a good book. But the 3-star reviews are the ones where they did like something about the book, but they didn't give it 5-star for a reason. And if you can find that gap, then that is what you can include in your own books. And then the 1-star reviews are usually about the paper quality on KDP, and there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah, they're usually, with the exception of, poor grammar, poor spelling, things like that, things that honestly should not occur in a book anymore. There's enough spell checks and free resources. Even if English isn't your first language, or whatever language you're writing in isn't your first language, there are still tools out there, paid and free, that things like grammatical error. And if there's grammatical and spelling errors enough to get 1-star reviews, I think that's ridiculous. But majority of the things that are in the 1-star reviews are things you can't control.
Exactly.
The KDPs, when Amazon sent the book, they sent it in a bag instead of in corrugated cardboard, and so the edges got bent and things like that. Things that we have no control over, but unfortunately, when a customer buys it, they're buying it from you, and so you as the author are going to be the ones that's going to take the hit with that 1-star review. So yeah, I agree. The 1s and 2s usually don't give, and 5s don't usually give a lot of context. And so, yeah, 3s and 4s are the ones I really love to read.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It should be a habit that we get into, to read those reviews when we research a niche, because there's so much information there, and people tend to ignore that a little bit. I think research is not just about the BSRs and about how many competitors there are. It's also about, what should my book look like? What should my book feel like? What should it include? What should it not have in it? Some books might be too long or too short or whatever. And you can only really find that out from reading the reviews. Because if you read the description of the books, they obviously tell you it's all sunshine and roses. So that's not where you get the value from. So yeah. And it's the same if someone gives you your book a 3 or 4-star review. It's all a learning curve. You can learn from it. Sometimes people give silly reasons for a friend of mine said she got a 1-star review, says, I haven't even read the book, but I don't like it. What do you say to that?
Yeah, it's funny. One of my children's picture books is for, it's actually called the concept book. It's about the letters. And I actually got I think it was a 3-star review from a teacher or a principal at an elementary school. And she didn't like that all of the letters were in one book. And because you're not going to, when you teach a kid, you're not going to teach them every letter all at once. And I'm like,
don't read it all at once.
I'm like, did you want me to have just a book for A and just a book for B? Now, don't get me wrong, that's actually a great concept.
Yeah.
And could be a great, book that I could do, for that particular brand. Yeah. But I mean, I can't, my mom was a preschool teacher for like 30 years. And I told her that, and she thought it was the funniest thing, because she's like, you don't sing just the A's when you're singing the alphabet song.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So no, I thought that was funny, but again, it did someone, I learned from it. And then other people, if they're, in that same niche, if they read it, they would learn from that too. Yeah. And at least, like I said, not stop me from creating that book or creating a similar one, but give me ideas on little spins that I could do on it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to take a bad review and make it into a positive, really. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been another great mastermind, Nuria. If you enjoyed today's mastermind, we'd love it if you would follow or subscribe to the podcast. Have a topic or suggestion? Click on the send us a text link below this episode and let us know what topic you'd like us to discuss. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, add your topic ideas down in the comments. Until next time, I'm Keith Wheeler.
And I'm Nuria Corby.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining the Mastermind today. Be sure to follow the podcast on your platform of choice and tell a friend who would enjoy it too. Your support is greatly appreciated. This has been the Masterminding Success Podcast.